Hey.
Back to Preacher's Hour. This is actually episode 80.
We made it.
We were wrong last time.
You were wrong.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, Josiah didn't have my back. He just let me be wrong. He didn't even look it up. He was like, sure, could be.
No, he told me.
Oh, great.
He told me that was episode 79. I just
Both y'all just was like,
I just let you ride the train, man. I was like,
let me crash and burn.
like, who am I to judge you, man? Like, do you speak your
man.
truth, Jeff?
Proximity, bro.
Speak
you guys
your
are in
truth.
proximity. You need to tell Jeff you're wrong. It's 79. This is episode 80. Congratulations, guys. We made it to 80.
Hey, 20 more to 100.
Wow, that's crazy.
That's wild.
So this might be
Our last episode.
no man. This might be one of my favorite topics.
Which might be.
Which might be.
Oh, it might be.
Yeah. So hopefully you guys did your homework. I already talked to one person that did. Emma was like, "Yeah, I already." She's like on episode 7 already.
Oh, let's go.
But hopefully you guys did your homework and listened to the podcast titled "The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill."
Man.
That is going to be our topic.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. If you ain't seen it, turn this off.
Yeah, if you haven't heard it, please don't listen. If you plan on listening to it,
Yeah.
I think I don't want to give people like a bias, like our, kind of like
that's
our.
a good point.
Yeah, I want you to listen to it for yourself.
You got to
and
listen
then-
to it with fresh ears and then come and check us out and see if you agree with us, disagree with us, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you haven't listened to Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, turn this off right now. Okay, you've been warned. All right, we're continuing.
Let's go.
So, if you have listened to it, man, what were your thoughts? What did you think? I would love to know. I've talked to many people. I had a very intense discussion last night with Patient about it. And it was good. I mean, it was a very good conversation. But it's just, I think it's been cool that it sparked so many conversations with amongst our group,
Oh, for sure.
just with different people. So if you do not know what it is, the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. Mars Hill was a church in Seattle, Washington, that was around from I want to say 97 to 2014.
Yeah, that's accurate.
And it was a huge church.
It
grew up. It was
exponentially.
massive.
Had multiple campuses.
Multiple campuses in different states. And then it died really quickly.
Man,
And
only 14 years. That's
I mean, hey, man, churches be 3 years sometimes.
That's true.
So
I mean, dude,
a
and-
lot of church plants don't last. more than
churches
3 years.
do have lifespans, so
That's
no church is gonna last forever. If it
Yeah.
does,
It's either really good at adapting and bringing in new leadership and things like that, or
it's just stayed the
it's
same.
just stayed the same, and it's really actually a zombie. It's been dead. It's just walking around still. So the pastor of this church was Mark Driscoll, very famous pastor. I remember I discovered him at the end, around 2013, right before everything fell apart. And I had heard about this guy, and I was just, I just started my teaching job, and I was really excited about things of God and trying to grow and learn. And hadn't really started preaching yet, but I was really into preaching and listening to different pastors. And so I'd heard about this guy. I'm like, yeah, I want to check him out. Got his podcast, and I was like, I mean, I liked some of his stuff, but there was some stuff that he said I was just like,
Yeah, something's always kind of was,
I don't know about that. That's a little,
and it's weird
bit
because
much.
a lot of it was just in my spirit. It was
Yeah, there was just something about it.
I don't really rock.
I'm
I don't
not
know why. I
sure.
don't. I see how you got there in the Bible,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure.
He said it with such I mean, he might be right, I guess.
Like,
but
who would say something that bold and be wrong?
I'll never forget this one sermon I heard him. He was talking about how the culture is obsessed with zombies. Because The Walking Dead was super popular at the time. And there's all these different zombie movies and video games and stuff. And he was like, our culture's obsessed with zombies because there are zombies. They are the Walking Dead. And they need to be brought back to life. I thought that was that's kind of cool. Okay. But and it's crazy, hearing this whole podcast.
Yeah.
And then what was happening.
And
it's wow, this dude was really good at with his media team especially.
They were on top
taking the culture and then being able to make sermons that spoke to the culture, what was popping in the culture at the time, which isn't all bad.
No, it's not sustainable, but
Right.
and it always puts you in the back seat. But it'll work for a while. I mean, you'll definitely be in the car. You'll be on the right track. You'll be on the up and up, and then the ride comes to an end without your knowledge because you're not the one driving. So
man, yeah. But the podcast itself is basically interviewing a bunch of people that were a part of it, that knew Mark Driscoll, that were kind of around the church but not directly in it, or who directly in it, and just really giving a voice to people and really trying to explain, like, how did this happen? And not just like, okay, we're basically talking about this one church, but it's really like a like lesson on, I think every Christian, every church can learn from the successes and the mistakes of this church.
Absolutely.
And
that you should be aware of them.
Yeah. And just like what's really broken with us as a community, like as Christians in America. Yeah. There's something wrong with the way that we think about church, think about pastors and do church. And the scary thing was that so many churches have ended up like this, are like this right now, can end up like this. We're part of planning a church right now, and it's like we could easily fall into this because like these people started with good intentions,
and we can literally see, we can kind of see like the setup. Yeah, like it's like, okay, cool, like you don't have to address this right now. Yeah, but this could become a huge problem, and I probably wouldn't have understood that. Yeah, if I hadn't listened to this podcast.
Yeah, I agree.
Once I listened to it, I'm like, oh wow.
There's so many things that I just growing up in church and looking back and what I've heard from different people, just like the whole thing is just like, wow, like this is really subtle and it's really easy for us to slip into. Yes, like it's almost like natural for us to do these things.
I think it is natural.
Yeah, and it's not that they're bad in and of themselves, but like unchecked and like combined together, like a lot of bad things can result. A lot of people can get hurt. A lot of people left the faith because of this. That was the worst part, that when the church collapsed, like a lot of people walked away from Jesus instead of just walking away from this particular church. There's a lot of hurt, a lot of jacked up relationships, and man, it just shows you like so many things, like power and the power that pastors have, the power that church members give to pastors and put them in certain positions, platforms, brand, all that stuff, man. It's really crazy. It's really again, if you guys haven't listened to this mug, like you need to. Yeah. So let's start out with talking about our favorite episodes. Brandon, I'm gonna let you go first.
Yeah, man. My favorite episode. Well, it's weird because it's not my favorite episode. Like, it's not like, oh, it's great.
I love this.
It's the one that I like.
That like hit you the most.
The one that hit me the most, one that impacted me the most. And it was episode that was called Things We Do to Women. And the thing that like impacted me most, and most people know this about me, but my wife is a preacher. And her and I pastor the youth at On M's Covenant Church. And our background didn't allow, mine or hers, allowed to let women like preach. They could teach, but they only teach women. And they didn't get much of a voice in the church at all. Like it was all like male led. And listening to this podcast, it brought up a whole bunch of things that like I was taught as a kid that, I thought were normal. And I thought that were helpful for community and helpful for like growth as a church. And then found out that they're really detrimental and they weren't really helpful at all. One thing that I noticed about this episode was how we kind of frame being head of the household, like men being head of the household. Yeah. When we frame that, the way we frame like being a protector, and then almost like forcing women into this subcategory of lesser than. Yeah. And there's parts of me that's like, okay, cool, I understand the Bible when it talks about like a woman being a weaker vessel, but I don't believe he's saying that in terms of intellect, or ability, or anything like that. I think what he's meaning is like I've designed women to be like physically less, I don't know, strong.
Yeah.
That on average, just normally what you're gonna get.
That's not really debatable.
It's not debatable.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want it to be, that's totally fine. But
I'm sure there's
some women who are super strong. But like that's something you grow into, or you have to like train to be. Men are just built like dudes. So with that being said, I'm like, okay, this is what he means. Like, look out for her anytime that she needs help. But that doesn't mean that she always needs help.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that she's always like stuck. It doesn't mean she's always like needing a man to complete her. And that was kind of like what I had growing up. Like, if you're not married, if you don't have a husband, like you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. The crazy part about that episode, and I'm sure you got maybe some clips you want to play.
Yeah.
But was the theology at Mars Hill was that women who are Christians shouldn't and can't work.
That was weird.
That was crazy. There were women that like had good jobs and they were required to leave their job, and then have tons of children. And that their only job was to be at home raising their children. That's it. Like homeschool, that's all you're good for. And I remember, I think I vaguely remember there was this one point in the episode where they're like, well, she should be too busy to like want to go get a job. She just have another kid.
Yeah.
Just have another kid. And their rationale was that we're in the city of Seattle, which is like one of the most unchurched cities, secular cities in the country. And we need to take over the city.
Right.
So if there's more of us like buying houses, and that was another thing, buy houses, you have to buy a house, right? If you can't afford it, you got to buy a house. Have a bunch of kids so that way we can physically, population-wise, take over Seattle. Which is like, okay, but what?
No, it's not.
It was weird.
It's not okay.
Like I kind of understand the logic.
In a sense.
Like,
but not
barely.
Not to take over the city.
Yeah.
So like it almost sounds like, oh, come on, let's raise our own army against these people.
Yes.
Where when you start to realize the people aren't the enemy.
Yes.
Sin is the enemy.
We need to get them on board.
It
was weird.
It was weird. And like
I felt so bad for the women there. Like,
especially the ones where their husbands really wanted to be a part. And even I thought about this in one part of the episode, they talk about how if you were in like church leadership and you were an elder or something like that, like there were times when like you and your spouse couldn't literally not be together because like you're dealing with like church stuff and your wife is not is not astute to be here. Like she's not qualified to be here. So you can't. And I'm like, man, what if you're like really going through it? Like you're just like, oh man. And if you didn't, and just everything about like the loyalty to Mark Driscoll and the loyalty to the church image or the church brand, it was just too much. And I don't understand how you would find that to be helpful to women and or men who are married. Like you're just causing discourse in the home for no reason.
Bro.
So I just found it to be super strange.
I'll let you play the clip. There was this other part in there that was so sickening to me. Like the thought process behind like a husband and wife and how the wife's job is to make sure her husband is pleased.
Oh,
like,
bro.
He has sexual appetite, sexual desire.
That you're supposed to fulfill
it is your job to fulfill it at any cost. If he ends up, cheating or looking at porn, it's your fault because you weren't like it was like being a stripper for your husband.
Oh, bro.
Do all this like there's no talk of pleasing the wife.
None.
It was her only role is to make sure he is satisfied. No matter how crazy and sick and twisted his desires are. You don't ever tell him to get his stuff together.
Yeah. I was freaking like, self-control, my guy.
I was like, this is disgusting.
Bro, it was gross.
What are we doing out here?
It was gross, man. And I don't know. It's detrimental. And then it almost places all blame on the woman. And it just goes back to
all this pressure and insecurity and fear. Like, women are coming around trying to steal your husband. You got to do your job. You better strip for your husband and all this stuff.
What
the heck are we talking about?
Could we have men who are like lovers of God?
And do you have to please your wife at all? Does she give any consideration at all? It was just like, this is crazy.
It was hard, man. All right, so let's listen to this clip, and then we'll just chat about it for a little bit.
Mark had a heart for women who'd been abandoned by men. One ex-member said they couldn't count how many single moms Mark would buy groceries for. And another talked about his willingness, especially early in the church, to drop everything and help a woman in crisis. I've heard from a number of abuse survivors who heard Mark's words and Mark's anger about abusive men and thought, finally, somebody sees me. And yet, for so many others, their experience was quite different. Whatever gratitude they felt for his willingness to pay attention to the issue was often crowded out because his solution was yet one more way for them to be marginalized. It was as though the only thing that could stop a bad, violent man from subordinating a woman was a good, violent man subordinating the same woman. But in the end, when it comes to creating a culture in your church, you can't glorify violence and condemn it at the same time.
All right, bruh. So that part is what struck me a lot, because number one, just subordination.
Yeah.
I cannot fathom the amount of times that I have seen women who have great potential be subject to less just because their husbands weren't like on that level, or couldn't appreciate like their input or even their work ethic because they weren't at that level. When I first started preaching, my wife was told that she couldn't preach, even though she had like this fire burning inside of her. And I remember her like just saying like, babe, I can't say yes because it's wrong. And I was like, man, like that's tough. Like I understand where Paul is coming from when he says women should be silent in church, but I can't see how like that would be right if we let women speak in church at all. Like that can't be the reason. It can't be the fact that women are going to lie or mess up the gospel in some way. That's why they should be silent. I think that there was something else going on in the culture when Paul wrote this that was disrupting the church, not the fact that women just should not talk at all.
Well, I mean, even though Paul said women should keep silent, there are many other times where Paul is talking about women prophesying and women doing certain things and listen to this person, listen to this lady, listen to this lady. So whatever he meant by be silent, he didn't literally mean
be silent.
Say nothing. It's impossible because otherwise he's contradicting himself.
Exactly.
So yeah,
that's been my heart, and it's like because of things like that, weaponizing scripture has like led to things like this where we're talking about we're to have a man to be over you. So if you have a bad husband, get a good husband who's going to do the same thing, but at least he'll protect you. If you have if you don't have a man, like find yourself a man, because then that's where your worth will come from. Even the scripture that says like women will be saved through childbearing, it's just like, bro, like they are more than people makers. You know what I'm saying? They're more than that. And when I saw the potential of my wife, I couldn't deny it, and I wanted to be like, no, you got to calm that down. But it's something where God is doing something in someone's life, and you are the one that is subverting that and making them feel lesser than. Because of, I don't know, at the time, to be honest with me, it was my ego. It was like, dang, like I heard my wife like preach to girls before, and she's way more passionate than me. So I'm going to agree with my pastor because like I feel insignificant. I feel insecure. I feel like I'm not like measuring up. And there was a time when like it was a competition. I remember my wife had gotten more like, and I said this on our very first season, that my wife was getting even like more preaching assignments than I was. And I was like, dang, like, come on, what the heck? I'm like jealous. But once I realized that we work better when we complement each other, like we can thrive in that. We don't have to like, she doesn't have to wait for me to give her approval to do what God told her to do. You know, at the end of the day, it's God's rule over ours. So I was that whole episode just really like messes me up because it allows me to understand I don't want to hold anyone back from what God has called them to. I'm not going to make anyone quit their job, leave their whatever, like just because like someone said so.
Yeah, it's so weird, the assumption that if a woman has skills and abilities to work and like have these jobs, has these degrees and master's degrees and all that stuff, and then she gets saved, that God didn't give her those things. And it's like, you got to give all that up because you need to be in the house. You can't be out here with 3 PhDs. What are you doing?
You can't provide for your
You can't
family.
be over here making 6 figures. We need you to be at home. Let your husband do that. Which is, it's just such an interesting mindset. And it's an interesting like understanding of scripture because there's a lot of things in scripture that are, you could, and you know, I don't know how to do go about it. But like, there's some things that are restricted to the culture of that time.
Yes.
Right. And just understanding like that women are made in the image of God too.
Exactly.
And that literally together, we are the image of God.
Like, amen.
Together. And it wasn't God's like original plan, I feel. I mean, just reading Genesis, I don't see in there.
Oh,
before the fall,
no, not at
I
all.
don't see how God was like, yeah, Eve, you're less than Adam, by the way. Like they were, to,
Well, the fact that she was like drawn from Adam,
yeah,
like you are one. Like you literally are one. You work together as one. You work as one. The fall created distance between you, not because that's what God wanted, but that was out of our own selfish desires, and we've like carried that into like where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, just understanding that God creates humans. He creates Adam, and he tells Adam, you need to be fruitful and multiply. And then Adam cannot do that by himself. And then God says it's not good for Adam to be alone. And he doesn't go and get more dirt and breathe into that and make that, okay, here you go. He literally splits Adam. Think about this. He takes them apart and then says, okay, you guys need to be one.
You got to come back to each other.
But we already were. Well, it's just like it's just like God. Like he is three
always
in one. So that's what he made us in his image.
Oh, wow.
So we are
that's
to
beautiful.
Be separate, but also one.
That's dope.
And that's how we are able to do the call that we're called to by God, which is our command.
I love it,
so, man. But yeah, I mean, it's just, that's a whole nother podcast.
Man, for real.
Yeah, man, that episode was heavy.
It was heavy, man.
It was episode 5, I think.
Was it 5?
Yeah, it was 5. I remember you told me you need to get to episode 5.
Oh, yeah.
And I got to it and I was like, ugh.
It was gross.
It was a bad taste in your mouth.
Man. It was really, and it, just like the way that they like parade sexuality.
It was weird, man. It was, and the way that he talked about him and his wife and just all that stuff. Like,
from the pulpit, though.
And I mean, like, I'm all for, like, freedom and like, sex is beautiful to get from God between husband and wife. That's all great. But, like,
you don't got to be specific.
Listen, man. Y'all, come on, man. I'm not trying to look at you and your wife. And
not at all.
What y'all doing, man. Keep that between y'all two.
I remember there's one like time when I was like preparing a sermon when I first started preaching, and I don't remember what I was explaining, but I remember because I got in trouble from my pastor. He was like, "Don't ever like put your wife in a sermon that way." But I like mentioned her like coming out the shower and like how that made me feel and and I don't know what I was talking about, but I was like, I don't know what you was talking about. I have no idea. But I was a young preacher and I was obviously learning, and I just remember like how like because for me I'm like, this is what I like. But I don't know who the heck is out in the audience.
Right.
Like, just because you like that doesn't...
Especially if they're not married.
Yeah.
They're single. You're not helping them.
You're not helping at all.
Yeah.
So, like, he just reprimanded me. And I was like, I don't know why he tripping so hard. Like, this is not that big of a deal. And he was like, But now, being grown and, like, being, I wouldn't say a seasoned preacher, but having preached multiple times, I can get it. I understand it. I understand how like my words from this pulpit, my words from this podium, from this platform can affect the lives of those who are listening. Yeah. And it may not be for like, just that week. It can affect them forever. Like you hear what Mark talks about and you're just like, you talk about people who hear one sermon and like drop everything and change their life. And like, dude who moved to Seattle to be closer.
A couple people moved there, quit their good jobs. That's a totally different part of it. We'll get to that after. So my favorite episode was the second one. It was episode 2, which was called The Boomers, the Big Sort, and Really, Really Big Churches. And it was about the history of mega churches in America.
Yeah.
And what led to a church like Mars Hill. I didn't realize that there are currently over 1,800 mega churches.
1,800?
1,800 mega churches in America.
Good Lord.
Like,
how many people is that?
That's, dude, mega churches.
That is insane.
Like I think of a mega church. I don't even know where one is, like around me. I've never been to a mega church. Like People's Church might be the biggest church that I know, and I don't know how many people go there. Maybe 1,000. I have no idea. I honestly have no idea.
3,000, but
that's basically maybe it's a mega. Maybe it's the closest mega church I'm ever going to experience.
That's like a mini mega church. That's what I'm saying. Some of these churches, like 15,000.
That's what I'm saying. Like 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 churches, 1,000 people churches.
That is insane.
There's 1,800 of them at least in the country, which is interesting.
3,600,000 people.
Oh well, good math, Jose.
Let's go, Jose.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate that.
But
that's a ton of folks.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. So this talk, it chronicled like the history of that and how they started in the 50s. It really goes back to the 1950s. And this guy named Robert Schuller, I had never heard of.
Never.
But he kind of started the whole mega church thing. He moved out to California. And then Rick Warren, who I have heard of, he kind of followed him like the 60s and 70s in Southern California, in Orange County. Created Saddleback. And it talks about Bill Hybels, who had this huge church in the Midwest. He recently got in trouble like 2018, 2019. Yeah, we'll talk about that. But it was just really, really interesting because I'm a history guy. So it was just really cool to hear like how American churches have gotten to where they are. And it's just been like this slow development, and there's a lot we can learn from it. And just like the different like trends that these guys used to know where to plant their churches.
Yeah.
And
even like just the way they did it with real estate developments.
And like just demographic shifts and like how, and then the differences between different generations. Like the boomers are the one that started it, and then baby boomers, and then Generation X, and then millennials. And it's just fascinating to get that like zoomed out picture of the American church. And we understand church history, but like not recent church history, not in the last 100 years. You know what I'm saying? Like we study like, the Reformation and like the church fathers and all that old stuff, but we don't really, I think because we're so close to it.
Yeah. It's not history to us yet.
Studying like what's come not that long ago before us. You know what I'm saying? So, let me go ahead. I'm going to play. I have 3 different clips I want to play.
Dang, in California alone, there's 191 mega churches.
So, like, what constitutes a mega church? What's the minimum membership you have to be counted as a mega church?
It says to have an average of 2,000 members weekly.
Weekly, okay. Wow, that's crazy. That's a lot of people.
A week?
I mean, that's a lot.
That's a ton.
Okay, dang, 191. That's wild.
Comprising of almost or about 765,000 people.
Wow.
The largest one is Saddleback with 22,000.
Saddleback Warren's church, yeah.
22,000 weekly.
22,000 people coming. You have an arena.
Weekly?
Yes.
Bro, you have a Save Mart Center?
That's what I'm saying.
As a church.
I mean, and I don't know how to feel about it. Yeah. Like, I don't want to say it's bad.
No.
But I don't know if it's good either.
I don't know if we're doing justice with the body of Christ.
Yeah, like I don't know if this is what Jesus had in mind. I don't know. I can't say he'd be like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Or like, yeah, absolutely. So,
and that's 2,000 in multiple services, not just in one service.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So you're talking about 6,000 people per church if you have 3 services.
Okay, so let me play this first clip. Make sure I'm okay. It's about a 3-minute clip. Here we go.
The trouble with these myths is that they're myths. They're rarely true. Behind any success story, there's usually a complex web of social connections, cultural conditions, and sheer dumb luck that made something work. So, with Willow Creek, we see the hagiography of Hybels, but we don't necessarily see Sun City or Robert Schuller in the background. And there's something else we don't see, something utterly boring that contributed significantly to Willow's success and was just as important as their ministry model. Here's Daniel Silliman again.
I think if you go back and if you ask why do mega churches exist, where they exist, when they exist, the one commonality you find across theology and across time and across, despite, different personalities, is demographic change. The suburbs, it turns out, are behind a lot of mega churches.
You can see the whole thing unfold in census data. Suburbs start to fill during the post-war economic boom of the 50s, right about the time Robert Schuller shows up in Garden Grove. Palatine, where Willow Creek first established their ministry, tripled in population between 1960 and 1980.
As these megachurches began to grow, they really became kind of one-stop shops for the whole family. You don't know anybody in town, and you can join this one entity, and all of a sudden you're connected.
With a move to the suburbs came a new way of life. If you lived 10, 20, or 30 miles out from a city center, you just got used to spending more time in your car.
They might have to drive a half an hour to go to work, another half hour to do their shopping. So, they didn't think anything of driving past 20 or 30 other congregations to get to their megachurch that they wanted to associate with.
It's not just churches that were getting bigger. Houses were getting bigger. So were strip malls, shopping malls, and box stores. Everything in the suburbs just got bigger. Consider, too, how much infrastructure, technology, and industrial advancement was changing life during this time. Cars, highways, and interstates, audio amplifiers and sound systems, air conditioning, a staple of the suburban experience in new homes and shopping malls. None of these were really invented for churches, yet it's hard to imagine the proliferation of the megachurch without them. It's also not just the case that people were moving, especially starting in the 1970s. When boomers started establishing themselves and their families. People were moving more and more into clusters with folks who shared their values and culture. The journalist Bill Bishop called this the Big Sword, a demographic shift in which cities, schools, political parties, and churches became more homogenous over time. Framed negatively, you can see it as the impetus for the kinds of division and polarization that mark our politics today. But as it unfolded, and even now as it's reinforced in various ways, it's seen as the ability to live, work, learn, and worship with people who are just like us. As a result, pastors like Schuller and Heibels could plant somewhere with a pretty clear expectation of who was there, what their values were, what their preferences for music or sports or politics might be. And they could program ministries that were narrower in focus and well-targeted to the demographic.
Man,
Bruh,
that's wild.
that's crazy.
Just being able to, and there's a cynical side of me that's like, so the Holy Spirit wasn't involved at all.
That
It wasn't like you prayed and fasted and like God showed you need to move to this place.
That's the one thing that's lacking in this whole story.
It's like, no, we were to look at some demographic data. Because literally Rick Warren says in this episode, he says, we looked at 3 different places and the 3 fastest growing cities or counties in the country. He was in Texas and we found out that Orange County was the fastest growing county at the time. So we moved there, planted the church.
Which then says it didn't matter what you did there. It was going to grow.
Now, they're still, like they said, using the big sword, using the data. You still have to market, right? Because as this continues, it talks about they had this dude called Saddleback Sam. He was like this stereotype of the person that would live in that place.
Yeah.
And what they would dress like, what they would want, what are their values, and then you're able to create programs and things like that to market to this person. Then you can guarantee it'll grow. You know what I'm saying?
You get buy-in from that.
Yeah, it's what people's politics are like in that area, what they like, what their preferences are. What race they are. Like, it is really interesting. Like it's. I mean, think about it in our own context. If I wanted to plant a church in Clovis, I know what I need to have at the church, what kind of music I need to have.
Yeah, exactly.
What I'm going to talk about in certain things, like what I'm going to call stuff, like the things that we're going to not talk about and talk about. I can guarantee growth at that point.
Yeah. And if I was going to, do it on West Fresno, those tactics wouldn't work in that neighborhood.
It's super interesting, bro.
That is so crazy.
Yeah, man.
And even when you even Google Saddleback Sam,
That's what they told you. I didn't do it.
You didn't do it?
No.
So this is my guy, so you can see. Because I thought it was a cartoon. This is my guy.
Yo.
He's a real person. He's a real person.
Yo.
But the thing that like gets me is this. It's like how they target it. This is the craziest thing. So it's this. It says that Saddleback Sam is well educated. Mm-hmm. He likes his job. He likes where he lives. Health and fitness are a high priority in his life, along with his family. Like, along with his family? How'd that come second? He'd rather be in a large group rather than a small one. He's skeptical about organized religion. He thinks he is enjoying life more now than he did 5 years ago. He is self-satisfied, a little smug, but works well with others. He prefers the casual look over the formal, and he is overextended in both time and money. Which is like,
knowing all that, and again, like, is this automatically bad? Like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because as a Christian, as somebody who wants to reach these people, right? Mm-hmm. I need to know what they're like and what they value, so I can speak to that.
Absolutely.
And help them, like, you know, become part of the kingdom and follow Jesus.
So you're not disconnected from the people you're trying to witness to.
But I know what their needs are. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, this guy, I don't need to tell him, you know, you can have a better life. He's like, my life is great.
Exactly.
So I'm not going to preach to you that way. Mm-hmm. There are things that you're going to approach him a different way, which I think is valuable. I think that's good. But part of it feels like really fabricated, inauthentic, like prayer and the Holy Spirit. Like, where is that?
Yeah, and I think that's and I'm not saying that they didn't. It just
right.
I do feel it feels weird when you're listening to the podcast and you notice the one strand that goes through all the episodes is the fact that no one's praying, no one's like, or they're not mentioning that. Yeah. So that's the one part that I'm like, I'm not really sure. Because I can't say that they're just like making all this up. I do believe that they are praying. I believe that they, I don't think that any of this success happens, especially the real life change, happens without prayer. Even if your prayer was a little bit, I don't know, selfish to like grow your own church, someone came there and met Jesus for real.
No, I mean, the episode where they talked about all the baptisms and stuff was really cool. Like, and I agree with you. I think the people that were from the church that were being interviewed in the podcast, you don't really hear them say like, yeah, we came together and we prayed for Mark that God would work on his heart. You don't hear that.
No.
Right? Patient actually brought that up to me yesterday. And I agree with that. Like it sounds like they were just
like it was a business.
Hurt. They were afraid of Mark to the point where they felt like they couldn't challenge him. If you did challenge, you were gone, which we saw.
Yeah.
And so
that's like, a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. We don't need to take a break. We're at 38 minutes. I'm just going to skip the break.
Dang.
We're just going to keep going.
Just I looked at you.
He was like, guys.
What?
No, we're going to keep going. Because this is how crazy this episode is. But yeah, man. Let me skip to one more clip.
Oh, man.
Okay.
This is by far, like, and it for everyone, like, listening, if you're listening, you skip the warning, like, and you're still here, thank you.
Yeah.
But you have to listen to this because, like, we're not giving like full context of things.
Not at all. We're assuming you've heard what we're talking about.
So if you haven't heard it, you might be like, "What's going on?" Please listen to this podcast. It is such a good listen, and the way it's formed is good as well. But it just will help you in your life when you go to churches, you see churches, and especially if you're trying to plant a church. Please
listen. That's the biggest people who need to listen to this thing is like if you're a young church planter, you're a young pastor, young preacher, like this showed me like how susceptible to pride we are as preachers because the people will give us praise, they'll give us a platform, they'll give us like
because then they don't have to do anything.
I mean,
listen, like, hey, I'll take it, bro. You gonna do everything? All I gotta do is okay. Here's $7. Please,
they're
go ahead
like,
and help me out.
I will, Pastor. Let me carry your Bible for you. You get the best parking spot. You get the biggest office. You get
everything. You're literally
stuff.
the CEO.
And it's like, how can you not get puffed up? How can you not get prideful?
The only way you do that is if you have people telling you no often.
Man, it's...
Oh, you want a big office? No. Take the smallest one.
Yeah. And you better find a parking spot. You better get here early.
Get here early.
You know what I'm saying? Like I had to. You know?
That's hilarious.
Okay, let me play this. This is like another 3-minute clip.
Warren's approach was similar, only instead of reaching hippies, he was reaching yuppies. Chuck held baptism services at the beach at Corona Del Mar. Rick's version of this, in Saddleback's early days, was called Jacuzzis for Jesus. The common thread was what Chuck Smith first articulated as a come-as-you-are attitude. And like Calvary Chapel, Saddleback's success inspired an entire generation of pastors. But there's a downside to allowing the dynamics of the big sort shape the culture of your church, and it may just not be avoidable in our day and age. You'll find that as successful as you might be in one place, with one approach, by design it won't work in lots of other places, and it may not translate across generations. Here's Ed Stetzer.
The Seeker movement was built on the idea that if you did church, if you updated the church, you spruced up the building, you spiced up the message, and you sped up the music, that would engage baby boomers, and it did. And it worked. I mean, we can actually see numerically the 80s being a bump in attendance in churches. And then what happens is everyone who's going to be moved by that is already, they all got the mailer, they all, got the invite from their neighbor, so they're in or they're not.
For many Gen Xers, they weren't. And the problem wasn't necessarily the message, it was the culture. Boomers, for instance, were also called the me generation. They grew up in the aftermath of the victory of the Second World War, and they had big wins in the cultural struggles of the 60s. They stopped an unpopular war, and they won the civil rights battle. They also went to the moon. As a result, they were marked by a spirit of individual freedom and possibility. And in spite of all the worries about lazy, dirty hippies, they went to work and were driven by it. They also, in that spirit of freedom, divorced at higher rates than any generation before or since, and their kids grew up with shifting family loyalties and busy parents who were focused on their careers. These latchkey kids, born to hippies, raised by yuppies, grew up with Watergate, Iran-Contra, the recession of the 80s, and the Challenger disaster, just to name a few. And then, when they came of age, a million hand-wringing think pieces were written, wrestling with how we ended up with a generation of cynics and slackers, and how the world that boomers had built was doomed if it was handed over to them. Time has proven most of that alarmism wrong. Gen X has done just fine over the years. But what was true was the disconnect. The sense that the values and culture of those boomer churches weren't effectively translating to younger people. Rick McKinley was a pastor and a Gen Xer struggling with that disconnect.
I wasn't raised in the church, and I had spent 10 years in ministry, and had come to a place of just being like, man, the churches that I had worked in would never have reached my family, my friends, that sort of thing. And I just felt like there was a more faithful way to be the people of God, kind of in the midst of a cultural shift that was taking place.
That sense that something big was happening was pervasive. There was clearly a generational transition beginning, but there were a lot of other factors. The end of the Cold War, rapidly advancing technology, the coming of a new millennium. Lots of people felt like something paradigm shifting for our culture was taking place. Dave Travis served with Leadership Network, starting in the 90s up until 2018, including serving as their CEO. Their work often focused on large, influential churches, aiming to understand what made them effective and multiply it.
Man, that part about generation, like, oh, this church would never reach my generation. I think we all experienced that.
Yeah.
Like, my parents' generation, they're Gen Xers, I believe.
Yeah.
Like, the churches that we grew up in, it's like, man, this isn't for us. This is for them. We need our own thing.
Yeah.
And we did that. And I guarantee Gen Z's going to be like, ugh, these freaking millennial churches, this is not for us, man.
Yeah, I think that's so true. At our church, we've experienced that already. We have a I think it's intergenerational.
Most churches should be and probably are intergenerational.
Yeah, so there has we have a growing little kids. So I don't even know what generation that is. I don't know if they're still Z's, but like
I have no idea.
Them. And then we have our, we have a small like teenage population. We have a very small young adult population, and then we have a large Gen X population, and then we have an even larger boomer population.
Yeah.
So what we've been trying to do throughout the years is like, how do we connect from boomer to babies, and then saying like, how does this translate? Because what we understand is like our church, if it's going to grow, which it should, because we're getting new people to come to Jesus every week. If that's the case, we need to be able to reach everyone, not just the people that are cool with like how things are. We got to be thinking about how things will go, how things will become in the future. So I've seen this like firsthand where like students have literally been like, bro, I don't like your preaching. This is boring. And like walk out of like youth church. And I'm just sitting there like, what the heck? And in that moment, I realized what I did for older people, because I was raised in an older church, what I did for will not work with these younger generations. Like they need relationship more than they need me to be preaching at them.
Man, that's what we're seeing at Flipside with the young people. We've tried for a year now, like to preach to them, and they would rather be taught and talked with, like talk with them.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's actually difficult to learn how to do that because all of us have come out of churches where you get preached to.
Yep.
And so trying to make that shift is difficult. But we need to do it because we're looking at what's happening. It's just, this whole thing is just so interesting to learn from.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, even now, just thinking about how our students they don't want to know it all. They want to know that you're learning with them.
Well, the crazy thing is that because they have technology and they have information, like I can learn.
Yeah, I can Google this
That's
right
now. That's
now.
not my problem. It's not a lack of information.
Yeah.
Which it is, but they don't realize that. It's more like get to know me and value me and see me, and then then I'll be willing to listen to you. But like it's got to be like a two-way street, like you said. But
yeah, I see.
But man, getting back to what all this means as far as the podcast and Mars Hill and all this stuff, like you have Mark Driscoll come out of this, right? He was a Gen Xer. He was totally turned off by the boomer churches.
Completely.
And so he tried to create something different and new. And it was interesting to hear the church at the beginning, what it was like and what he was like.
Yeah.
And then as he got bigger and got more fame, got a bigger platform and got speaking engagements and writing books and
his ego kind of took over.
It changed, man. And like the people, I mean, the biggest thing I'm trying to like push is that this is not all on him.
Absolutely.
It is literally, like I said at the beginning, it is a flaw with us where we are a celebrity-driven culture. We've said it many times, and we want to celebrate what the word celebrity comes from. We want to celebrate somebody. We want to give them a platform. We want to worship them. Let's be real,
bro.
We want to worship people.
I was just talking to Jessica this morning, and she said something about like she just preached last night, and it was a really great sermon. And she had talked about how in community, the way that you like stand strong is by like encouraging people like through the struggle. So if someone like is feeling like they want to leave the faith, like you encourage them not to. You don't just like let them leave. You encourage, like as a community, we don't let you just give up. And so she talked about like the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I don't know the Hebrew names. Every time I say it to you, I'm like
Azariah, Mishael, and Hananiah.
Yeah, them peoples.
It's their actual names.
But that story that's very familiar in Daniel, I think it's in chapter 3. The students left and was like, oh man, I'm good because I don't worship anything else. In their mind, they're like, I only worship when I'm at church. Because to them, they only use the word worship at church.
Wow.
So they have no idea that they're worshiping other gods.
All the time.
Had no clue. I mean, they talked about, they will go in for hours about like Drake and going to a Drake concert and like, oh man, like I guess he's coming to LA like soon. It's like, oh man, Drake's coming to LA. Are you gonna go? Hey, we should go as a youth group. And I'm like, go as a youth group. It was so funny, but I'm just thinking like, oh, bro, like they have zero clue that they worship other gods. They think because they're not worshiping the way that old people worship, then they're not in the same boat. So that was like a very interesting thing to see and to hear about. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. We got a lot to talk about.
That's wild.
Yeah,
my gosh. So something I wanted to get to is kind of our second bullet point here. What can every church learn from this tragedy of Mars Hill collapsing? So, couple things, bro. Like we've kind of talked about power structures in churches / leadership.
Hey,
I think it's the episode The Brand.
when they fired the dude,
Oh my gosh, guys. So if you're familiar with the episode, because hopefully you listen to the podcast, he had those two pastors, I forget their names, but they were like, they're from the very early beginning, like 2000, near the beginning of the church. And one of them was a lawyer. And so he brings them onto the elder board, right? They have a ton of elders. And everything's just growing. I was talking to Paige about this last night too. He's like, nowhere in the Bible do you see like boards and, CEO and all that, and like all this executive and all this, like, we've brought so much complexity to this thing.
Yeah.
And probably like for good reason, because we have freaking mega churches with thousands of people and arenas and all. You do need some infrastructure to make it all flow. Some
absolutely.
logistics, but it is messy.
It's so messy.
So he brings these guys on. They're part of the elder board, and then he wants to change the bylaws of the church. And bylaws are a huge thing.
Yes.
And he wanted them to do it in like a weekend. Like, I'm leaving for some trip. When I get back, I want it done. And homie was like, nah, this ain't it. Like I'll have some questions about some of these things.
And that was the thing. We have some questions.
Yeah. And he was like, dude, I'm doing my job. You hired me to help you with this, look over this. And he wasn't even like pushing back. He was just like, yo, it says here that you kind of basically are taking the power away from the elders and putting it with Mark. Like he's going to have all the power to do whatever he wants. And he was trying to tell the other boards, like, hey, guys, look at this. We're giving up our power here to help manage and balance the church. And they were like, oh, whatever. Mark calls him out in the sermon. Doesn't say his name, but calls him out in the sermon. He says, I'm about to, do some stuff. Sermon ends. He says, hey, you guys meet me in my office. Fires them on the spot. In between services.
And I'm just like...
And then brags about it.
My thing is that I wasn't there.
Yes.
But I always think about how that would play out.
Bro.
First of all, I don't even know you're mad. I don't even know you're mad. Like, you asked me to look this over. I'm like, cool.
You fired me for doing my job.
Number one.
You hired me for.
So I'm like, hey, I got some concerns about this. Let's talk about this next week. If you get into town and then all of a sudden you're just like, they did what? They asked a question?
They defied me?
No.
I'm about to get him off the bus and run him over with that whole metaphor was wild. I got a pile of dead bodies behind the Mars Hill.
The Mars Hill
bus. You're either gonna be under the bus, you're gonna be in the bus. And I was like, this is
it's
bit
just
much.
Really dark. And even with that, like with the power structure, if your church is like has none, and I a part of me is like, okay, cool. I do feel like autonomy in a church is good in a sense for getting things done quick. But the problem with
you're talking about authority,
yeah,
like having one person like kind of
they have like the final say. I think that's a way to get things done quickly.
Yeah. It's more efficient having an authoritarian rule.
But the problem is they have the last say
and the first one,
and no one else can change whatever they say.
Yeah,
and the scary thing is when you start using words like God told me or the Spirit of God is telling me to. Then
this is the mission.
Yeah. Then you're like...
he said they were off mission. By trying to look at the bylaws, my guy, they're off mission?
And on by whose definition? And secondly, whose mission are we on again? Like... Whose mission is this?
Bro.
So I always think like, if you want to... Which is I think it's an African proverb, or I think it's an African proverb. If you want to go far, go... If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Go together. Yeah. And I feel like Mars Hills is exactly that. Like they went fast. They grew exponentially fast.
Yeah.
But they didn't go very far.
Yeah, man. So that is looking at one side as far as like, okay, there's definitely a problem with Mark as far as his power and having too much and trying to and literally changing the bylaws to get more, right? And from his perspective, he was under the impression, he convinced himself, which may have been true, I honestly don't know, that they were trying to take his church from him, right? And taking his power. And it's like, well, number one, it's not your church. It's God's. Jesus is the head.
And he would talk about like, oh yeah, the elders are gonna fire me at any moment. Like they have the power to. And
which
like,
was
wait,
nonsense.
No, they can't fire me at any moment. I can't let that happen.
Yeah.
Let's change this.
I mean, like he started getting to a point. And again, let me make this clear, because I can hear patient in my ear right now. This podcast has clips, a lot of clips from Mark Driscoll's sermons, right? It doesn't give us the whole clip.
True.
We are hearing it is one-sided. Now, I think they seem to do a very good job of presenting as much as possible from different people. And obviously, Mark Driscoll declined to be a part of this. They reached out, at least they said they did. But from Mark's perspective, when you hear, the more as they get closer to 2014, you start hearing him talk as if like, I'm the only one who can do this.
Right.
This is completely on me.
Yeah.
No one else. All you guys are
vision God gave me.
Dumb, basically, to do what I can do. You guys, this can't go without me, basically. Like I am this church, which is terrifying. No,
it's terrifying. It's true, but it's terrifying.
So like the next bullet point, marketing, church growth, and fame, like, I asked Patient this question, and I'm asking this question, like, how many churches do you know that are made in the image of their pastor? All of them. I don't know a single church that's not made
I'm literally
in the
thinking
image
like
of the pastor, where it's like, oh, I go to so-and-so's church. Oh, you should come hear my pastor preach. Oh, we're here. It's literally, you are all there for this guy who's super charismatic and, you know.
I think, so I guess like a pushback to your question would be, is it even possible in this way? Because like if you're in the church, you can see a little bit more. Is it possible for an outsider to see a church and be like, that's a good church, like, or that's like, and not associate that church with its pastor?
Its pastor,
because that's its leader. So you would just like, in my sanctified imagination, I'm seeing a shepherd and his flock. You don't just be like, oh, the flock is just running around doing their own thing.
Okay, so once Jesus ascends to heaven, whose church was it? Was it Peter's church? Did they all go to Peter's church?
No, it was Jesus' church still.
Okay, but who was running it? One guy, right?
No.
It was a team of people.
It was all the apostles.
Correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, this is my thing. Like, have we now? I don't know if it's possible in today. Are we too far gone down this road where people will only follow one charismatic guy? We need a face, because that's branding. That's marketing.
That is marketing.
You need a face of the brand. You need somebody who people will be attracted to and follow, instead of like, hey, this is this church. Come to this church.
Yeah.
Be a part of the church. Well, I mean, one of my coworkers came to TG when we had friends and family, and Will preached. And she said, so is Will the pastor? I said, oh, no, Patience the pastor. She was like, but Will preached. Oh, yeah, we have a different people that preach. That's amazing. She was blown away.
No way.
So you guys have different people that preach? Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So that was my thing, because I was like, this is no flex. The only church that I know that has this model, and I don't know if this can stay the same as we get bigger, but is TG. So as I look at TG, like if you were an outsider or a person that, I don't say outside sounds super bad. If you have not attended or been a part of TG and you came in, you would have no clue. You would probably think the person who was leading the discussion or leading or preaching was the pastor, because we don't really have like a hierarchy. I mean, we do. So here's my thing too, though. Are we supposed to have a pastor? A single pastor? Oh.
Like, is that a rule? I don't know. I don't know.
I have not thought about that.
Because if I'm looking in the New Testament, and Paul says in Ephesians 4, Jesus has given some pastors and teachers and evangelists and
have we done that to
prophets.
ourselves?
Like, have we reduced it down to one guy?
Whoa.
Like, I don't know.
Bro.
That's what I'm saying, Brandon. Like,
I really think that could, I mean, I know I haven't researched, but it's mind blowing to think that you have to have
like we have to have
senior
one guy.
pastor. You have to have like a top person.
Yeah. And I'm not saying you do need somebody who can make a final decision. Don't get me wrong.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think so.
You do need good leadership.
You can have a team of people who make decisions. You
I
don't need
think
one.
You should.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I think you should.
And make it an odd number, so then you can't ever have like a
ties.
ties.
Yeah. I mean, there's a part of me, because it's all I know, and I'm thinking of so many different pastors that I know and respect, that I'm like, no, they're not doing it wrong. Like,
well, I don't think it's. I don't
don't know if it's wrong.
I don't think it's a right or wrong thing.
Right.
I believe that better and best, exactly. Because is the way you're running your church right now working? Yes.
I'm sure it is.
Is it growing? Yes, I'm sure it is. Is there a better way to do this? Because I've been thinking about Moses when he was in the desert, and Jethro was like,
"Bro, you need some help.
Okay, you can do this, but you're gonna die.
Yeah.
Can you do it? Yeah. Was he doing it at the time? Yeah. Yes, he was doing it. Is there a better way? Yes. Yeah. There's a better way.
I even look at the churches that Paul's writing to. They have overseers, which is what we titled now as pastors. We have diakonos, which is what we call
deacons.
Which is a very broad word. We're not even really sure what to do with diakonos, because it was women. There were women diakonos. Yeah. Too. But like, obviously, you would say that Paul was the leader of these churches that he had planted, but he didn't plant them by himself. He had Timothy, Barnabas, Silas, right? John Mark, and then he still had like the people in the elders' room, James and Peter and all his disciples who were still alive. Like, so it wasn't one guy. No. And we reduced it because of denominations and schisms and different things. Like, I just don't know if the way we're doing it is best.
Yeah, I even think even our interpretation of scriptures, because like we see that Paul wrote a letter to Timothy, wrote a letter to Titus. So it's like, oh, it was probably their churches. Well, maybe he just had the closest relationship with that person. Maybe Titus had a whole team of people who were like preaching and teaching with him, but he just addressed it to, or just easier, because we always think like everything is like super deep when it comes to the Bible.
Those two letters specifically were private letters.
That too, yeah. So
I mean, the other epistles, like the ones to churches,
they're not given to be read to the whole church.
The whole church, and circulated to the surrounding ones that you had planted.
That's true.
So
we could take that out of context and be like, oh, he sent it to the pastor.
And it doesn't say it went to the pastor of the Ephesians or the pastor of the Philippians. It went to the Philippians and the Ephesians.
Wow.
So, I mean, again, and I think those churches had pastors. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, for sure.
But our church is supposed to have one guy who is the face and the guy and the brand and the one that people are coming for. Yeah. Because, I mean, how many churches do you know where that guy's not there, people aren't coming?
They're not coming. Exactly.
I think that's wrong.
I think that's totally wrong. Because even if it's not a problem, even if like your church works well with one pastor, one senior pastor, whatever, the fact that your congregation is like, I'm only listening to this one.
Loyal to him.
Then that's a problem.
Not the word of God, not Jesus. I'm here for him and the way that he preaches.
And if he leaves today,
he's out, I'm out.
Which is crazy, because that then goes back to this whole celebrity culture, and I get to the last point. But I look at like huge, like big celebrity pastors, and I think about the Stephen Furticks and the Michael Todds, even like, which is not too bad, but I think about like Matt Chandler. But if they were to die, Lord forbid, their church is gone.
Yeah.
Like,
the church dies with that
one
guy.
person.
I think that's wrong. Did you hear about the whole Hillsong stuff that's going on?
Oh, with their like main pastor?
With Brian Houston.
Yeah.
So if you haven't heard, guys, I've done a very little research on this, but basically I had heard about what happened with his dad in the 70s. His dad was like molesting young boys and doing all kind of horrible stuff. It came out. His son, Brian, like, basically kicked him out of the church because Dad, you did this. Now he's in trouble. The son, Brian, is in trouble because they're accusing him of knowing that his dad was doing it,
and didn't say anything,
covering it up. Not covering it up.
But he kicked him out.
But did he kick him out after he knew it was going on for a while?
Oh.
That's what they're alleging. That's what he's under.
Oh, and then should he have faced like criminal charges?
He's literally going. He has to go to court. Like he's literally on. He's on trial, for possibly covering up that he knew, and so he stepped down from the board of like the churches all around the world. They have so many churches all around the world. He stepped down from the board. He's still the senior. He called himself the global pastor, which is a very interesting title in itself.
Because it wasn't his own letter.
Yeah,
like he wrote his own email, or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm still the global pastor.
The global pastor.
No, I don't think I'd ever fix
Jesus the global. Anyway,
I would never fix my lips.
Let me play this last clip. I think it's very, very interesting.
Rick McKinley would experience this firsthand, both in the challenges and testing that came with planting Imago Dei in Portland, and in being close to Driscoll and helping lead and expand Acts 29 through its early years.
I remember talking to Rick Warren, and he was kind of blown away at how fast all of our churches got to like 1,000, 1,500. He said it took a number of years, if I'm remembering this correctly, for Saddleback to get to that size. And what we were seeing is that, these gifted young leaders could blow up a church, but it wasn't necessarily a church yet, right? You could create a speaking event that was called a church. And we didn't necessarily have the character that was needed for that kind of weight, that kind of success. And in certain personalities, when those gifts are even more than, great, but they're just expansive, and Mark is so gifted, the character need is so much greater. Because what happens is you start to believe your own press, right? You start to believe that this is all happening because of me. And that's an extremely dangerous place.
Throughout this series, I want to keep asking the question, why does a fall like Mars Hill happen? Why do we get behind leaders whose character isn't prepared for the pressures of their platform? And maybe, looking closely at this moment in 1997, we can see a couple of hints. One is just the situation. As I said, Mark's about 27 here. He's 1 year into planning his church, and yet he already has a platform to fly across the country and tell other pastors how to get it done. The other one comes in the talk itself, very close to the end.
Gosh, guys, I love what I'm doing. I got charged by a demon-possessed guy in my pulpit. The night we launched, I had to exit counsel one of my key leaders 10 minutes before the sermon. I kicked him out of the church. My worship team left 3 months ago. We moved 6 miles in the first 3 months, and I love it.
Now you could hear those words and interpret them as smiling in the face of adversity. Or you could listen to a pastor celebrating kicking people out of his church and alienating his entire worship team. And you could interpret that sound as alarm bells.
Dude, bro, when he said their character wasn't ready for the platform, and the fact that you could blow up, and this is still a thing. I really feel like there's so many people that are, because we're so gifted, and I think humans, we naturally are obsessed with people's gifts. We love talented people. We love to follow talented people and like, oh man, you're amazing. You're so this, you're so that. And I don't know if anybody is really prepared maturity-wise to handle that kind of praise and attention. Right? And so especially, the dude was 27. And he's flying around the country teaching people
how to plant churches.
You're 27. You don't know anything at 27. I don't know anything at 32.
Right.
I can't be telling people how to do stuff.
And it's in different demographics. And all in all, I think that's one of the biggest problems. Just the fact that we will elevate someone so quickly because of their talent.
They're so talented.
Because of their charisma.
Amazing. Yep.
And it's like, you're not really ready for this. And then you get into situations where they fall and you're just like, what? How could this happen? Well, they weren't ready.
There was one of the episodes where Mark Driscoll says, like, I can't listen to somebody who has a smaller church than me.
Oh, dude.
He's like, I have 10,000. You only have 5,000. Why would I listen to you?
Why would I listen to you? Like,
you got to the point where you can't get wisdom from older, more experienced people. And there was another point where they said, if you are in your 20s and early 30s, just accept that you don't know enough.
Yeah.
You're too inexperienced. Just accept that. And that was so telling. I was just like, wow, like I'm imagining John's 25. I'm imagining John. John's very talented. Mm-hmm. John could blow up easy. And it's like, and I'm 32. You're 30. You turned 33 already?
I'm 32.
32. I'm just like, we have so much more to learn. And I was telling Patient this too. Like Patient's 39 almost.
Yeah.
And I had to tell him, like, dude, I'm sorry that you have to deal with most of your people that you're working with are inexperienced and young in their 20s and 30s.
Thinking that we know better than you?
And we don't. Like, you have to deal with us. You got to just wait for us to catch up maturity-wise.
Which I think is a beautiful thing that you can learn as a leader.
That we got to be open to it.
Yeah.
Because imagine if I was 27 and I had what Mark was getting, I would think I'm that dude too.
Oh, bro.
I am it.
You finna pay me how much? You
I'm
put me
flying
in first
around.
class?
Yeah, I'm writing books.
And people are buying them?
I mean, come on.
Bro, you ain't... Look, wait till I get my money, right? Oh.
Can't tell me nothing.
Yeah,
man.
That's incredible, man. Like, I think... For me, anyways, I look at it and I'm thinking to myself, God has kept me humble for a reason. God has kept me in a season for a reason. Mm-hmm. I bless God that he didn't let David go fight Goliath before he fought the lion.
Wow.
I thank God that he allowed me to, because you look at it in today's culture, like we could, like even my wife, as charismatic as she is, as powerful, as passionate as she is when she preaches, if she had not struggled with her call in the beginning, and like I think that she would have been like some people could have hyped her up way too soon, because I know my wife.
Listen, and like all of us at our age still have a ton to learn,
bro.
We cannot ever think we've made it.
Never.
And like you said, like Jess, like she has a lot of natural speaking ability,
where she doesn't have to try.
Yeah, she's just a naturally good speaker. That people will are attracted to.
Exactly.
And so she needs to make sure that she gets enough people around her that she can that she will be willing to listen to, that can push her and help her grow on the knowledge side of things. Yeah. Because she has, I think Mark suffered from that. I think when you're so naturally gifted at speaking, you can get by on that to where you don't have to develop in other areas. You don't need to.
Oh, wow. Absolutely.
I'm I don't have to work on this. It's like somebody who's just a great athlete.
Yep.
I don't need to work. I can get by on just my natural ability. I don't need to work on skills.
Yep. I don't need to go to school. I don't need to go there. I don't need
to learn.
I don't need to learn nothing. I'm good. I'm going to make it to the NFL. Leg break. Now what?
Yeah. And in the case of pastors and preachers, you're not breaking your leg. You're breaking
other people. Yeah.
You're breaking relationships and a lot
breaking
of stuff.
spirits.
Yeah, man. So
that's tough.
We could probably do a whole nother episode on this.
Man, I'm telling you.
And I'm not saying we won't. I would love to bring in John.
John's never coming in on this podcast. Not with this topic.
I know. I don't know. Maybe Patient. I don't know. Somebody
else. Yeah. Because we're not always right. And I think that's another thing that we've grown into. When we first started this podcast, we were like, we got a word for the people. And though we were nervous to do it, we were like, oh man, our conversations are fire. Like we thought we were all that in a bag of chips. And our first episode, we got stale. First episode, man, we got some wisdom from Uncle Rod. Yeah. And it just changed everything about our podcast, changed about our conversation. Yeah. And I don't look at it like, oh, you're trying to hold us back. We're trying to help us grow. Exactly. And we were able to get to where we are today. So I'm grateful.
There's a lot more. That was not enough time. We could definitely do another one. But
that went by fast. We didn't take a break.
Like we're at an hour 13.
Sheesh.
So we could go for longer. But honestly, guys, and we say this all the time and we don't get enough feedback.
Oh, yeah.
But if you guys would, I'm not going to ask that. You might. We'll do it when we feel like it.
There you go. Let's go.
See. But thank you guys for listening this long. If you got to the end of this, man, we appreciate it. We would like some feedback, but we're going to do what we're going to do. But yeah, man, thank you guys for your support. Check out our previous episodes. We got some cool ones coming up, I think. Got to talk to some people, but I think we got some good stuff coming down the pipeline.
For sure, man.
But yeah, love you guys. And we'll see you on the next one, man.
See y'all.